Okay, here we are. Good afternoon for those of you in our time zone, but hello everyone and welcome. You are here at the Berklee Music Education and Special Needs Study Group. I am Dr. Rhoda Bernard, the founding managing director of the Berklee Institute for Arts Education and Special Needs, and it's been my great pleasure to have you all as part of this community. And today we have Victoria LaRiccia with us again as my partner in crime, and we're going to be here to provide feedback on your projects. We had a rowdy and very generative and fun session this morning. And we've got a lot of projects yet to be shared this afternoon. So we're going to start with, and let me talk a little bit about how it's going to work, and then we'll get started. So the way it works is that most of you have either sent me your project over email or put it up in the Google Drive. I need to have your project so that I can share my screen. I'm the only one who will have share screening privileges. It just makes it easier. I can make it possible for you to speak to everybody so we can hear you, so you can speak your presentation to us. So, and I have a couple of folks who've told me that they can't attend either session, and we will present them on their projects on their behalf so that they get feedback as well. So among the folks who are here, if you are interested in presenting your project, could you please either raise your digital hand or put something in the chat and we can get started. And each presentation is 5 minutes of presentation time, plus then there's feedback. So, and we're really trying to stick to that because it's tricky otherwise to fit everybody in. So Lisa Pierce Goldstein, we've got you first, and then Julia, you will be second. So Lisa, I happen to know, because I remember, that your presentation is in my Google Drive. So I'm going to go get it for you.
All right. Am I
You
can
are,
you hear
we can
me?
hear you. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Okay.
So let
Yes,
me
my
get to the
presentation
slide.
is in the Google Drive.
Let me get to it and then we'll get you started. Takes just a
Oh,
minute for me to pull it up and find it and all that fun stuff. Um, and of course, Zoom has that little toolbar, which makes it impossible for me to see. Okay, here it is. So Lisa, you are up. Here we go.
all right. Hello, everybody. Let me give you just a little brief introduction to my project. I've been participating in this study group and doing several other related activities as part of an independent study that is meeting a coursework requirement for a PhD program that I am currently in. And for my day job, I work as a speech language pathologist for the Boston Public Schools. I am also an opera singer with deep classical music training as well. And for my project, which was part of my independent study, I did a literature review where I examined 4 approaches to using music with students with disabilities: music education, music therapy, music as therapy and education, and arts integration. And I was very curious, since I am plopped in the middle of that whole constellation of approaches to using music, as to what the literature had to say about each and all of those components and how they intersected and wove and dived together. It resulted in a 45-page paper before references. So you are only going to get a very, 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 very brief introduction to the work that I did on it, but I will do my best to give you the little springboard. So the slide that you see now, education in music and education through music, is language that is used by Adam Ockelford and Graham Welsh and the Sounds of Intent team coming out of the United Kingdom from their a survey of music provision for students with severe and profound needs in the United Kingdom that they did starting in the year 2000. And as a result of multiple surveys and interviews and observations, they broke how music was being provided into these two strands: education in music, which is pretty straightforward. That's music education as we know it, and education through music. So that was how music was used in educational and therapeutic ways to target non-musical behaviors, non-musical goals. Next slide, please. So the four approaches that I examined were music education, music therapy, music used therapeutically or educationally, and arts integration. Next slide, please. So for each, I'm just going to give you my basic approach. I did a definition, and a few things, a few characteristics about each strand here. So music education, the purpose is to develop skills and knowledge in music. In the school setting, it's typically a licensed profession, meaning that you need to be granted a license by the state, which requires you to meet certain educational and practical criteria in order to practice. And music educators have deep musical training. That is a requirement of the profession. Next slide, please. Music therapy is a therapeutic profession in the context of the schools. It is considered a related service like OT, PT, speech, APE, vision, and its purpose is to address cognitive, physical, and emotional goals through music. Music therapy is a certified profession, meaning the difference between certification and licensure is that certification can be granted by a non-governmental organization. So a national organization may grant certification to people who have met certain criteria. Licensure comes from a governmental organization. So music therapists are certified, and in some states they are also licensed. Music therapy is also a profession that requires deep musical training. Next slide, please. So music used therapeutically, and I didn't wrap my why, or educationally, I define, and there's some bleed over between this and the next slide also. I define this as anytime music is used as part of curriculum instruction, as an activity or treatment method by a behavioral therapist of some sort, or as a community activity or for mood regulation. So anyone can use music therapeutically or educationally through this lens: classroom and subject teachers, related service providers such as myself, a speech pathologist, OTs, PTs, ABAs, administrators, paraprofessionals. Providers are likely to have necessary licensure for their respective fields. And musical training is not required to use music therapeutically or educationally, though, of course, any of us who work in schools know that people come from all sorts of backgrounds, and there are people who do have musical and artistic training who bring that into their practice. Next slide, please. Arts integration has a variety of definitions, but the one that I really focused in on comes from the Kennedy Center. And it refers to arts integration as an approach to developing knowledge in a curriculum area through engagement with the arts, in which objectives are present for both the curriculum goals and the artistic goals. Ideally, it is collaboratively designed by an expert in the curriculum area and an artist and expert in the arts area. Providers may have licensure or certification in their curricular or artistic discipline, depending on the setting. And ideally, the arts provider is highly trained in their particular discipline. Next slide, please. So to close, I'll just give you a brief rundown on some of the gaps in the literature. I think that there was a study done in 2010 on assistive technology knowledge among music educators. I think that we need a new one. I'm curious as to how much people are really collaborating. It's a huge theme in the literature, but to have some data would be great. Where are the disciplines crashing into each other? I think one of my big findings was that most of the empirical research has not been done on kids in schools. especially in music therapy, a lot was done on adults in hospital settings. So empirical research on students in school setting is really needed. And I was shocked at how little literature there is in my field and the field of OT, PT, and ABA on the specific use of music in treatment. There's a little, but for the size of those fields, there's virtually nothing. And that's it. That's my 5 minutes or more.
Thank you, Lisa. So Vicki, I'll start with this one. Since I'm advising this independent study, I've read this fabulous paper in multiple drafts, and it's extremely exhaustive and really, really thoughtfully framed, as I've told Lisa in my comments. The big takeaway, I think, for this group are the opportunities here, because the literature has gaps and there is a lack of research. This is where we can step in, and we don't need to be capital R university researchers to be doing research. The work that we do with the strategies that we try in our teaching and what we learn from it and how we then change what we do can easily be research that we just keep to ourselves, or research that we share by presenting it to others in Music Teacher Association and other professional association conferences, or writing short papers, or just sharing with other colleagues. So there are many areas where we can contribute. And the field it's partly, I think, because what Lisa's looking at is so intersectional, and that wonderful overlap in the Venn diagram doesn't have a lot of its very own stuff. And so this is our opportunity as we move the field forward. Vicki, I'm curious for your reaction, because this was more new to you than it was to me.
And I know Lisa from other meetings that we've been to at Berklee, so I recognize your face. Hi. So I teach a couple graduate courses at Biasen over the summer, and I'm going to speak about the gaps in research. I'm always trying to find new articles or studies done to support what I'm trying to teach to the graduate students. And you're right, there's just so much about music therapy in hospitals, but that intersectional piece of how is music education and social skills connected, and emotional regulation, and what is the research around that, what's the data, and what tools are the music educators using, is really hard to find every year. I'm always trying to update the sources that I use. So I appreciate that you're highlighting that, and you've noticed that those pieces of information, that data is missing, because it is.
I'm happy to share my reference list with you. See if there's anything new in there that would be helpful.
That would be awesome.
I'm sure we'd appreciate it. Thank you, Lisa. This presentation sort of sets up where we're going, right? Because we're looking at the issues on the field level, and now we're going to look at things more, I think, in many cases, on more of an individual level. So Julia was the person who had raised their hand. Lisa, I'm going to take your ability to be on the screen away. How does that? Oh, there it goes. And Julia, am I right? Is your project in the Google Drive?
Yes, it is.
Fabulous. So let me find it there, and then we will be ready to get started. So, is your name on it?
It is.
Yes, all the way at the
There we
bottom.
go.
Case study of Max. You are ready to roll.
Great. And I must admit, I'm more than a little intimidated by that wonderful research project.
No need. We're all doing our own work in our own ways that is applicable to us, so no need.
Okay. A little background of my own. I've taught at this small, tiny rural school in Sandy Cove, Nova Scotia. This is my 19th year there. And I'm changing schools this year due to driving too much. But so I've known this student that I called Max since and before he came to our school. There was a pre-primary program. So briefly, Max as I noticed him in the hallway and at our pre-primary program, I noticed that he was having some issues with, and I'm using air quotes, conforming to behavioral expectations. He was a very active, I would say toddler. He was 3 and 4 years old when he came to the pre-primary program, often running off on his own or just not too sure of the expectations of behavior at that time. And very pleasant, bright child, very easy to have a discussion with, other than his distraction level was quite high, so he changed topics midway. But so I do have quite a long resource, we call it in Canada. It's special ed training. And so I noticed straight from the get-go that he was probably ADHD, attention deficit with a hyperactivity involvement. So by the time he got to our grade primary classroom, he was more in tune with what was expected of him. However, his impulsiveness and energy level kind of worked against him in a classroom setting. So his teacher, right from grade primary, brought his case to our program planning team at the school. He started out on adaptations, what we call in Canada, program adaptations for behavior, trying to encourage him to stay focused and to have less disruptive behavior in classroom. He was not violent in any way, but oftentimes in other children's and other people's personal space and that type of thing. He just didn't know those types of conforms to social behavior. So during those period of primary to 3, he was in the same classroom with the same teacher, because we had 2 homerooms in our school. Our total enrollment at that time was about 20 children in total in the school. So he was with the same teacher for primary to 3. The teacher and the student, in my opinion, were kind of not a good mix. And so we tried to support the teacher as much as possible through, I often pulled him out for resource work, for special ed, for teaching, and just to give them a break from each other, that type of thing. And so that I could work on his other skills. Language arts, which reading was challenging for him to stay focused that long to learn the strategies for reading and that type of thing. So by the time he got to grade 4, he had some gaps in not only reading and math, but also his self-esteem was kind of affected by this point. He wanted to pay attention, he wasn't able to, that type of thing, how it goes with ADHD kids. So the last 3 years, he was in a new classroom with a new teacher. He's in grade 6 right now. And so next year he'll be moving on to junior high. This fit with the teacher, his current teacher, and for the past 3 years has been much more positive. He's been able to come around with his self-esteem. He really wants to work hard for her. So he's been able to work on his ability to focus longer periods. This is not a child who is on medication for ADHD. So we are working with him for his strengths, and we're direct teaching him some skills that he'll need in grade 7. The biggest thing that we've been working on this year is he still struggles with personal space And so, and he's grown up to be a very large boy. He's bigger than us. So we want to make sure that he's not misinterpreted by, you know, his grade 7 cohort and his teachers, that type of thing. I mean, it's all documented as well in his IEP. So we've been working on those things, mostly social skills. His reading, his math is super now. He's at grade level. So I've also had him in, since I'm the music teacher as well, I have had him in music for primary to 6. He's a very, very enthusiastic music student. He loves music class, but I've had some kind of wondering about him, because sometimes he shuts down in music class. He just totally refuses to even speak, and he just lowers his head and just sits there for 5 or 10 minutes. So how I react to that is, do you want to talk about it, Ethan, Max? And he often would just not even acknowledge that I've spoken to him. So he was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder after his ADHD diagnosis in grade 2. So I believe it was in grade 4 he was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder as well. So he's a delightful kid. He's really positive and upbeat most times. We've maintained a really good working relationship, he and I. So all those things are pluses, but there was still a question in my mind, how can I improve this? There was something I was doing.
So Julia, I love this, but I'm going to have to ask you to move a little more quickly.
Move faster. Okay.
So 5 minutes. We're way over at this point.
Oh, sorry. So I did try some strategies in the classroom, because I have a toolbox of strategies. So the first one I decided to try was just simple. So I decided to post our schedule for music class on the whiteboard. Very simple. And so I worked on that for 2 weeks, and I have ADHD as well. So it was really tricky for me to do that and to stick with it, but I did. It was amazing what happened after that. It was just shocking. That one little change
makes an enormous difference.
It was huge.
Students, yeah.
Yeah, and the transitioning was the issue. I figured out that. So it was the transitioning from one activity to the next. After the 2 weeks of me just being consistent and going over the schedule with the whole class, and everybody enjoyed the schedule, I didn't even have to go to my second step of trying a new strategy, because it worked. It was magical how it worked. And so that's what I found in my findings. Sorry to go on, but that's it. I mean, that was I need to be more proactive, and that's what I found from my little case study.
So I love this case study. I wish we had more time, but the structure and schedule for many students can be a really transformative experience, especially in music, which already sort of plays out different from other classes in school. So to help students really hone in on that. And I'm glad it worked. But there's a line in your document that I wanted to underscore, because you said one of your big findings is the teacher needs to change. And that's exactly right. So we've talked about universal design for learning in here, and universal design for learning, as we know, it came out of universal design and architecture, but it also came out of a time period in the 80s when education, especially for students with disability, was all about the medical model of disability, going back to my earlier presentation at our first session, and a lot about how can we change the students. And universal design for learning was one of the first big pushes out there to say, it's on the teacher. Our students are widely variable learners, and that's no matter who they are, whether there's a diagnosis or not, it's on the teacher to figure out the ways to remove barriers and get our students on board with what's happening. So I love that point, and what you describe is a perfect example of that. So thank you. Vicki.
And I love that you found a thing, which is just having the schedule on the whiteboard, and that's all you needed to do. And one thing you said about that was, you said it very quickly, but we read through the schedule first. And I think that has a lot of value too. Like I've seen teachers who have a schedule on the board, but they don't really acknowledge it. They just have it there. So
we talked about in the study group, Vicki, that you have to actually use it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
Julia, thank you. Really interesting case study, and we'll see how Max continues. Thank you very, very much. All right, so Jean is up next. Jean, you emailed me your project. So first I have to get you so you can be heard. And I know that you emailed me your project, so I just need to go get my email so that we can get that from you. So hold on just 1 second, Jean, and we'll be ready for you.
Okay, I'll test if you're hearing me while you're doing that.
We are hearing you. We are hearing you.
Thank you.
Here's PowerPoint. Yeah, this is it. Okay, so we are ready to roll.
Okay, so I'm Jean Raby. I'm a board certified music therapist, and for a long time, I've been trying to figure out how to effectively bring steel pans to special education students in first in a city area in Michigan, but now in a rural area. I was not very successful in the city area, and I think it's because I didn't really know how to talk to the teachers. So a little background on why steel pan is so important to me. And so I'm not going to read through every one of these. Some of you are actually reading through those already. But I started going to Trinidad and got my first pan in 1993. I've been going back almost every year, sometimes 2 or 3 times a year. I've been doing workshops and teaching music therapy at the University of the West Indies. And then I was asked to start mentoring student teaching artists from both University of West Indies and University of Trinidad and Tobago in the special education schools, which is awesome. So the first couple of pictures are from one of those special education schools that actually has an amazing steel band and started me getting more excited about it again. And that's the Goodwill Industries. That's a vocational school. And then these next pictures, the lady who chose special school is school age children. And that's a revitalized school band that wasn't existing, and now they're performing not as competitors in the junior panorama, but they were not quite ready for that. As they got revitalized, they were invited to be the opening act, and all of those students working with the students you've been seeing have been part of the ones I've been mentoring. And so I've got quite a lot of interest in how it's been working and mentoring them and helping them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what the steel band is, because there are some instruments that are very different. And one of the things about having some different or novelty instruments is no preconceived notion of what they're supposed to sound like. And so some special ed students are very successful quickly. So the engine room is the rhythm section, and then the steel pan. And I'm going to ask if you'll stay on this particular screen a little longer than the others. But this, the first one up at the top is a steel pan that I would play with no letters and no stickers. But I have since 1993 been using stickers on my pan to give an idea of what notes to go to. And then the color coding is a long music therapy thing, but mine don't match Boomwhackers because that wasn't in existence back in the 80s or when I started. But the colored stickers on the pan in the center, the left side of that, also have the green stickers for the blues scale in C, so that most of the group can be playing the accompaniment and one person can improvise. And I found that kids on the autism spectrum are amazing at improvising, and they love it. And it's somewhere that they would like to come and be within the steel band. And so that's a really nice way for them to get to express themselves, and everybody is thrilled because they don't all want to do the solo. Okay, the next one is the double pan, which is a double second, has 2 barrels. And so you can see this, it's more spread out. You have to use your arms across the two barrels to get to the instrument. So it's a little more complicated. And then there are, of course, larger instruments with more barrels. And then I've been doing school residencies in Michigan. And this particular couple of pictures that I'm showing you is the mother of the child on the right, but the boy with the light blue shirt, I was told he would probably never speak to me and he might not ever look at me because he was on the spectrum and he really didn't like strangers. But here he is after a week of working with me in a target group, and he's helping the mother of the other child. And so then the next year he wasn't part of the target group, but in 5th grade he was, and he changed instruments and he went out in a community performance. His mother left him with me and came back for him. She said, "I'm so sorry I can't stay," but he understands. And then he joined middle school band. And that's a really exciting thing to me, because me doing rote learning and not teaching with music, but also still supporting the music teachers. And so that's something that's really important to me. And then Pandemonium is the summer group that is from the other school within the district, which was the first school that we started doing steel pan with. And so I've got 2 pictures here because in 2019, we still had our first original player from 2013. But over the years, as she got into her teenage years, she started to have a lot of trouble with anxiety and went to doing online school for a while. But she still loved pan and loved playing up in front and loved playing melodies and really worked at it. And it was one of the things where she was really good. And then the other side, during the pandemic, we had some changes. She didn't join us anymore, but we had some other changes. I have foster children, have some young children who have not had like the testing to get an actual special education label, but they definitely have some special things about them. And so now looking at my next steps, trying to really approach special education schools. So not just the special education students within a school, but trying to just reapproach special education schools, have the guts to do it again. And I feel like being part of the study group has really helped me with that, because I feel more confident about what is going on within special education now. And at the bottom, you can see that I have approached now 2 schools within this rural area. And one is very interested, but of course, COVID is making that kind of tough. But on May 24th, I'm supposed to start at the school where Pandemonium is from, but the music teacher from the other school where those boys were from, she has been moved across the district, and now she's the special education teacher. So I'm really excited about that, because if we get to do the in-person residency starting May 24th, she and I will have that opportunity to collaborate on a totally different level. And we already have that trust, yes. So thank you.
We're going to stop the share and get to feedback at this point. I have to watch the time. I apologize. It's really hard. We're way over 5 minutes. It's really hard to share this kind of work in such a short time. I appreciate your attention to that. Vicki, why don't we have you start?
Wow, this is so unique. I love it. I love that you have accommodations. I love that you're seeing unexpected successes with some of the students, like the boy who was working with the mother of the other student, and you didn't expect that to happen. I love that there's all types of students who are engaged, and it's not just kids with autism or just kids with anxiety, foster children and such, and they all seem to be really into it. I would say if you're looking to continue to approach other schools or teachers, to have some data behind you on the successes you've had, so you can prove, like, look, this is what I'm doing, this is the data, this is the progress students have made, and that might make the schools and the teachers and such more willing to consider something new.
I agree. I love the scope of this project. Steel pan is great. And we need much more of it in our schools. And I love the accommodations and adaptations that have been made. I also think this is a really unique opportunity to build a nexus of collaboration with music therapists, special education teachers, and special educators and music educators. And that's what Lisa was just talking about. We need much more collaboration among the 3. And this is a really good way to build that. But and the individual stories are great, Jean, but I think Vicki is right to be able to have hard data about musical skill development, like a pre and post. This is what they could do before, this is what they can do after, to really demonstrate the impact of the program on a broader scale will give you even more material to convince administrators are looking for, that kind of information in order to make those decisions. I also think once you're able to get in person, it's going to explode. Because the other thing is when people finally hear this music, and I'm sure you have recordings and videos, and you'll be able to have students perform for each other and perform for other schools, that will be a very, very loud statement. I also think what's important about this topic is that it is encouraging for all of us that the work that we do with our students with disabilities and diagnoses doesn't have to be to just certain instruments or certain musical contexts. Steel pan is an instrument that is not taught in every school. In my opinion, it could be and it ought to be, but it's not. And yet, just like in every musical interaction and setting, there are great opportunities to engage everybody. So it's a good model for stepping outside of the relatively limited box of what we see in music education. And I love the music therapy, music education connection in a school setting, especially. So Jean, really rich project. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate your feedback. And it's so solid to think about being able to provide data. So I appreciate that, because when you're in it, you don't always think of the most simple idea. And of course it'll take me work, but it really is the simple way to attract administrators.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you very much. We are going to move on. So I want to make sure, let's use, for some reason, my chat is not working properly. I'm not seeing everybody as possibilities in the chat for some, there's a setting that's not working in the chat. So rather than the chat, if you are here and you have not presented in the morning session, and you would like to present now, can you raise your digital hand? At the bottom of your screen is a little raise hand symbol. Can you use that to raise your hand? Because I know there are folks here whose presentations or projects are in my Google Drive who were not part of the morning session. And I also have a couple who can't make it today who we can look at as well. But for example, I mean, I can also go through the Google Drive and see, but we've seen Adriana and Chris and Jean. We've seen Julia and Kevin. I don't have Kim. Kim, would you like to present? And if so, could you raise your digital hand? We've seen Lisa, we've seen Melody. Michelle was part of the other group, Rachel. We have not seen Rebecca either. So Rebecca, you're another one I'm wondering about. Kim, I'm writing this down, and Rebecca, and Suzanne, and Valgager. And I don't see anything in the chat. So while we are waiting on those folks, I'm going to go to a couple of presentations that came to me from folks who can't be here today. So let's go here. So we have Melissa. So this is from Melissa in New Zealand. And let's hope that the video plays.
Kia ora from New Zealand. My name is Melissa, and last week was my first ever teaching week. I retrained as a teacher last year, and I was very lucky enough to get a music teacher job as my first job. As part of my role, I take a class with children with special needs. They are around the same age as the school that I'm teaching at, which is years 7 and 8, so around 11 to 13. and they come and see me. I asked for feedback from their teacher, and it was really about a musical experience, but I also wanted to throw in some music education. I took a lot from Miles and Nadia's presentations around agendas, making sure that we were varying our movement between standing and sitting. The children have a range of abilities. Some of them are non-verbal, some of them are in wheelchairs. So for my first session, we went through this presentation. So I took the Hello song that Miles taught us, which I thought was awesome. And then we did warming up our bodies, and we did a song in Te Reo, which is one of our languages in New Zealand. And it's a really awesome song because it's got instructions as well. The kids really like that. And then we did some ukulele song on another one of our beautiful waiatas called Te Aroha. And it's a lovely song that a lot of New Zealand children know. And then I played the Flight of the Bumblebees, and I asked them to move around the room or use a scarf or whatever they wanted to do to sort of see what their body wanted to do. And then we talked about that afterwards. I started a percussion circle with them, and we just worked on cues and working and playing in time. And then we did a class band. So I played Happy by Pharrell Williams. Everyone had an instrument, or they could sing, or they could have a scarf, and we just jammed to it. And they really, really enjoyed that and left on a high, maybe a bit too high, but had a really good time. So thank you so much for these last few months. It's been great for me to learn, and I've just absorbed so much information, and there's so much I want to do. Thank you very much.
And thank you to Melissa. Vicki, would you like to provide Melissa with some feedback?
So that was her first week of teaching ever? Oh, wow. She seemed very prepared. So I love that she incorporated all the components that she learned from the study group. What a great way to get ready to start teaching. And she used the agenda, which some people have presented on, and how that was just so helpful. And starting the year off with that kind of consistency and predictability is great. And she seems to have some UDL kind of naturally woven in there, in differentiated instruction, letting students choose how they want to express themselves and getting them engaged in many different ways. So sounds very successful to me.
I love it as an application of so many strategies. And you're right, the chance to get off on the ground floor, right? To begin with these strategies in place and start using them and tweaking them is, I think, really exciting. And I can see all these different pieces from the study group sort of coming together in the things that she's trying, which is wonderful. And it'll be very interesting to see how things progress from here, right? So starting off with these strategies, which ones is she going to keep? What might fall by the wayside or get tweaked? What new things will need to be added, depending on who the individual students are, right? So the strategies are great and they're a good point of departure, but we're not teaching the strategies, we're teaching the human beings in the room. So we need to make sure that, and I know she will, as she gets to know her students more and more, she'll be able to tweak and morph and change and try new things. So thank you, Melissa, for bringing so much together in such a short period of time. It's pretty exciting. We have another presentation that was sent to me that I'm going to go back to my email. And this is from Cynthia Galvin, who could not be here today. So we'll go through her slides. So this is from Cynthia Galvin. Oh, it sounds like she's got audio. Let's see if we can hear that.
I chose to do my project about bringing the violin to my neurodiverse learners. I noticed that my students with autism were having a very difficult time when it came to playing the correct string in the echo activities and in the full songs we were doing. So I wanted to find a way that I could better bring the violin to them. I also see this same class once a week for a general music class. In that general music class, we're using a program called Preschool Prodigies, and it's a desk bell curriculum where the students watch a video and it moves the song along the screen by color. And So I decided to see if I could make elements of preschool prodigies find their way into the violin classroom. First, I made covers for the violin fingerboards, and I labeled each string with the matching color and the letter from the bells from Preschool Prodigies. Each song that we're using in class was printed out, and I colored over the notes with a crayon so that the notes and the words to the song would be colored the same colors it would be as if it were Preschool Prodigies. I was really pleased with how these changes to the program helped my students with autism to play the violin in class with their classmates. In the future, I'm going to see if I can color code more songs, and I'm also going to explore using the actual videos from Preschool Prodigies in the violin class and see if some of the songs might feasibly be played on the violin. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Short and sweet.
Short and sweet, but also very informative. I love the consistency. So the Preschool Prodigies has a system with colors and a particular set of songs. We're going to take those colors. Color is your friend. We've talked so much about color in here. We're going to take those colors and transfer them to the violin. I think aside from the covers of the fingerboards, we could have diagrams. We could have the students draw. We could have big violins on the floor with color-coded strips of paper. So there's lots of other representations that we could use to UDLify it a bit, but the consistency of the color scheme and then color coding the music that way, right? This is, it sounds like a lot to do, but you do it once and then you get to reuse it, right? But I love the idea of creating that consistency so that the colors always correspond to the same pitches. And it's very simple for the students to make the switch between the bells and the violin. So I think it's a really great way of using that strategy to make that connection. What do you think, Vicki?
I agree. And I'd be curious about, the fading out of the supports can be challenging sometimes. So you need to be a little mindful about it. But I wonder if having students be engaged in the actual coloring of the notes or coloring of the board that goes over the neck, so that they are the ones creating the color. Sometimes the act of just handwriting or coloring with the hand can facilitate memory and help students internalize skills. But and then eventually just being really mindful about how that color gets faded out and how you pair the language of notes and pitches and strings and all of that verbal information with the color so that when you fade out the color, students know what you're talking about.
So this was something that came up this morning. I'd like to ask you to be a little more explicit about what you mean. I know what you mean here because we do this, but just to break it up a little bit. We don't always want to say the red string because then we're not using the colors. We don't know which string was the red string. But can you talk a little bit about how we do that?
Yeah, so I forget what string or what color was paired. So I'll just make something up like the red string is the E maybe. So if you're telling students if the verbal direction or the visual direction is to use the red string, you want to also say the red E string, so that those two pieces of information are together. So that eventually when the red goes away, you're just saying E, but they know that the E was once red.
Exactly. Otherwise, we'll be looking for red when there isn't any red anymore. Very cool. Thank you very much, Cynthia. That is terrific. I want to just make sure before I go through I will go through the folder and see what we haven't seen yet today.
And a couple people put in the chat that they're not presenting.
Yes.
I think that you had named off. Yep.
I saw that. So let me go to the folder. So this was back in my email. But let's just go to the folder. What have we not seen today? We saw that. I do not believe we've seen this from Catherine Schmidt. So let's see Catherine's presentation.
Hi, I'm Catherine from Melbourne, Australia. And firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of this land where I am today, and I pay my respects to their elders briefly about me, I've been teaching at my school, which is a school for students with autism for coming on to 15 years. And at our school, our students range from ages 5 to 18, and everyone has a diagnosis of autism and a language disorder. Very few students use speech generating devices. Many use a core vocabulary board with French vocabulary for their extra words. I've always supported student communication, particularly with the younger students, using aided language displays for your songs like Alton Donald, Pete the Cat, I Love My White Shoes. And I struggle to find ways to use communication supports like this with the older students.
Oh, we can't hear it anymore, Rhoda.
In this program are rumbles, and I've found them to be extremely effective in getting language out of students.
Can you hear it? Because I can hear it.
I think you might, the audio is coming through your microphone and not directly through your computer, because it's kind of
Okay,
hard.
let's do this. Let me go back and reshare doing that properly. Yeah, I had already done this and it stopped doing that. All right, we'll come back to it. And here we go.
So
Better?
go around the room, and everyone takes a turn.
It's soft.
It's soft, yeah.
I've had students who present as very passive learners. I've had them leave the group, go and get their core vocab board with their French vocabulary, and then offer something to the group by pointing to the picture that they want us to rumble about. So rumble if you like swing, rumble if you like chocolate, rumble if you like popcorn, things like that. And I've seen the joy on their faces when they are able to join in. So I've been really wondering how I can take this further, how I can use songwriting or lyric substitution activities with the older students to encourage them to use their communication supports and to develop their language and their expressive ability further. So, in keeping with our school goals around student voice and agency and to support our older students, I decided to see how I could do this. So I sent an email to all the teachers I knew and all the music therapists I knew who are working in special education settings, and I got 4 replies back. And I'm sort of going to summarise those replies in a Google Doc, which I will give you the QR code at the end of this video, so I don't need to spend time talking through all the different things. But as a brief summary, it really sounds like the FITB, the fill in the blank activities, are something that really supports students because there is a structure there and they can slot the words they want to in. I tried one activity that I found through looking on the internet, using a Smule auto rap app, SMULE. And at the end of the class, I went around and asked each student in this class, all the students were able to have at least some verbal language, asked them to say something that they liked about the class that day, and then pressed go, and it came up with this funky rap where all the kids' words were interleaved across each other with this cool backing track, and the kids loved it. The only problem was there is obviously content on the Smule website that is not appropriate for our students, and so it's blocked by the school. So actually an assistant downloaded the app onto her phone, and obviously I can't do that as a regular thing. I need to find something like that that will do some sort of rap generation, but doesn't have that my school can access. So if anyone has any ideas, please let me know. With the Smule app, I really liked the way the language that the students used came back at them in a fun way. So much of the communication that's taught for my students is functional. I want to go to the toilet. I need a break. I want an apple. I want swing. So through rumbles, through the Smule auto rap, through lyric substitution activities, through music, you can play with language. And through the language, you can start to
And there's the QR code. Wow, Catherine, thank you. That's extremely kind. I've never been rumbled before. That's awesome. I think this is fantastic. And I think Catherine has pinpointed something really powerful in this project. And that is about expanding the range of student communication and expression. So she is 1,000% right that functional communication, and we just had Lisa, who's an SLP, giving her presentation. She can speak to this from her experience much more so than I can, but that functional communication is the focus. I want this, I need this, a response to a direct question that is getting to a particular function. And now in this kind of work, with lyric substitution, with composition, and with music, without even words, we can be communicating, these students can be communicating, and it's not functional. It's expressive, it's silly, it's beautiful, it's meaningful, it feels good. It can be all sorts of other reasons that we express ourselves, and music gives us that entree. I think that's extremely powerful and something really significant to build upon in any creative way that you can. To expand that range of communication possibilities, I think is tremendous. Vicki, I'm curious for your thoughts.
I love that she has an end goal, but is still trying to find the way to get there, because it's a big goal and it's so important. Because I mean, imagine if you live a life where the only language you can communicate is just what you need or what you want. And she said something about it, like, I want to know their personalities. I want them to be able to say who they are. And I love that that's her end goal. And she's got a couple things that are working, like the fill in the blank. That's a structured way for kids to insert their language. And they have, the sound was kind of funny for me in the beginning, so I didn't catch some of the things she said, but it sounds like they have some communication devices that help with single words, with communicating single words. And that app is so fascinating. I've never heard of that. And I love that she's like, it's kind of inappropriate, but we're still going to figure out a way to use it because it's important. I wonder too, if there's some strategies from English language learning too, because sometimes there's some overlap when you're learning English as a language versus struggling to express English because you have a disability that makes it hard to express yourself. Like there's fill in the blank, but there's also like sentence starters. Sometimes just giving like the first 5 words of a sentence and seeing what a student would do with that afterwards might help.
Word banks on the other end, right?
Yeah.
Similar kind of
word banks. But try exploring if there's any English language learning strategies that might help. But I feel like you're on the right path. Music is a language, as someone else said earlier. And I think even if they're not using words to express themselves, the music itself is the expression. And that's okay if language is not part of that.
100%. I think for those students, probably their, language and expression is all, sort of wrapped up together, and music can be a vehicle to plow right through that barrier, which is huge. Wow. Thank you, Catherine. We're going to go back to the folder and see what else we have not heard from yet. Celia has not had hers presented yet. So we'll go to Celia. Celia Donahue. I'm writing it down so I have a record of who's presented. So we're looking at Ben and Annie. Ben is 8 years old with ASD. Annie is his 6-year-old sister. They took online individual piano lessons from March to June, and their names have been changed. Celia has taught piano for many years, most recently as a music therapist. She's qualified most recently. She teaches Ben and Annie and tries to adapt her normal beginning strategies to suit Ben. And with the benefit of this course, particularly the content on UDL and differentiation instruction, she's looking back at the experience and wondering how she would now approach a similar situation. So Annie would sit immediately at the piano and get her hands ready on the keys and open the book. And she loved all the warm-up games and was happy to progress through the book page by page with lots of enthusiasm. Ben, on the other hand, took time to sit down, would first touch every surface, stretch his arms across the keys, focus on the extreme high and low registers rather than middle C in that area. The warm-up games were often extended because he would have long musical improvisations. He learned to read the notes in sporadic, short but intense minutes of concentration, and he loved improvising tunes with a visual cue, like a piece that he called Grasshoppers and Elephants. So looking back, she felt like the lessons with Annie worked very well, but something she might have changed is more chances for Annie to improvise and play by ear. She feels like the lessons from Ben had a wide range, from very good engagement to very poor engagement. And she offered him a lot of choices, but it might have been too many choices because he zoned out. What could she do differently now with Ben? More routines. I'm right on that with you, and we've heard that consistently today. Playing a hello song, playing a goodbye song. Describe, name, and color code a limited number of activities. I think when we're going for choices, sometimes it's just 2 choices. Nadia does this all the time. So she'll be doing a song and they have to pick a fruit to go on in the song. There's a particular song, she does the mango song, that the students substitute fruits, and she will ask a student, do you want the apple or the banana? So it's not which fruit would you like, because it's too many. Or it's not, do you want one of these 7? It's one of these 2. So I'm thinking even 2 to choose from at first. And if 2 feels like it's working, then maybe we go for 3. And then we can take turns to pick things. What new teaching aids? Talking less, visual more, you bet. Absolutely true. Give Ben access to the whiteboard so he can use other ways to describe his music. Love that too. Redesigning the book. Yes, we want less on the page to overwhelm. So start something blank and then have you all construct it. Fantastic. Add in new tunes and he could write and draw and play with notation in all different ways. And he could fill in a practice chart very simply and put in some ideas. When Ben's lesson isn't going well, a brain break or a slow breathing time, and you can play the piano to match the mood, or some headphones time, or some musical jokes time, or even something not musical. If Ben has a particular interest, we had a student, one of Nadia's private students, who was obsessed with trains. And the room that they had their lessons in was near a set of train tracks. So they would take their breaks looking at the train tracks together and talking about trains. And it would take about 2 minutes, but it was a great bonding experience. And it was a complete break from music, which is fine. Overall, familiar routines, opportunities to express himself through more than one art form, a personal book, and even perhaps some duets with his sister. I'm really glad that she got some practical presentations and that she is joining us from one of my favorite places on earth, from Ireland. So I will stop the share. Vicki, what are your reactions?
Again, super reflective presentation. Started off with something, reassessed, evaluated, see what worked well, see what didn't work well, and made some changes, which I love. A couple of things that Celia talked about that I loved, and Rhoda, you were talking a little bit about this too, was using the blank page and then kind of gluing or pasting in what they're working on. So sometimes pages can be formatted that just in a very busy way, which can cause students to either feel overwhelmed or anxious, but it can also get them to be, cause them to be distracted, because they're like looking through like, what is all of this? And they don't focus on the one thing you want them to focus on. So I love that idea. Sometimes you can make like a kind of square out of a piece of paper and you kind of use it as a window to cover up other stuff if you don't have that option. And I love that she's noticing when the lesson isn't going well and she wants to give Ben a break. And she has a bunch of different breaks to offer. And I would advise, try to teach him how to notice when it's not going well so that he has the language to ask for a break. that takes time. That takes a long time for kids to do that. But you as the teacher will notice when it's not going well, and you can say, looks like you need a break. Here are your two options. Which one do you want to do? And then prompt like the kid to say like, oh, I need a break. Or if they're nonverbal, you can have a little card that says I need a break, or a visual of the student taking a break, and they can point to it.
Fantastic ideas. Celia, thank you for your project. We're going to take a look and see what's next. All right. We have not seen Kristen, and she had more than one file here. And I think what we do is, there was one, so she had, this was her zip folder, and it had, this is where we go. She walked me through this before. So Kristen, this project is about how to be nice, and it's a series of rhythm patterns that she developed and some visuals, and she's tried this with a few groups of students and was surprised by how difficult it was for them to identify ways to be nice. So she's really trying to work on social emotional learning and behaviors and how they treat each other, and it brought up some good discussion. They enjoyed learning the patterns and playing as a group. And here are some things she had to think about when she was working with different groups of students. I'll show you the materials in a moment. It's a work in progress. So everyone learns and practices everything together. And then once everyone's comfortable, you can play it one person at a time around the circle. 4 patterns may be too many to play together for some groups, maybe only 2 patterns at a time, or gradually adding in patterns one at a time. So what Kristen is doing is she's taking sort of the drum circle rhythm patterns work that we've seen, and as well as social stories and other aspects. So here you can see some of her how to be nice instrument cards and how this looks. Let me get it to present mode while it's loading up. So say kind things like well done, and we have different instruments to prompt. Listen to other people. Don't hurt people. Don't talk meanly, right? Don't tell people what to do. So you see, these are some of her suggestions. So she has been incorporating this as a way of bringing music and social stories and discussions about how to treat each other all together. So I'm curious, Vicki, for your feedback on this.
I love the intersectionality. I love when you can teach multiple things at once. And I always say this, and all of you are saying this, music just lends itself to social emotional learning so easily. So I love it. And I love that you have accommodations and modifications so that students can be successful. My one piece of feedback is to try to make the language a positive. Like, for example, we listen to other people, and I do this and I do that, instead of we don't, or I don't do this. Because sometimes when you use negative, like the don't or do not, I do not, that means everything else that isn't that they can do. So almost it's using the positive language is a little more specific, and it's positive.
Really good point. I like that too. I like the use of the rhythms and the different instruments and the possibilities that it presents. We've had other projects in past years where people have written songs for social stories and songs for routines and behavior cues. And I like this because they're shorter patterns that are all in duple meter, so that people can overlap them and you can play with them, and they can be interchanged and used in a lot of different ways. Thank you for that note about the positive language. That's super helpful. Let's go back to the folder. And I think I go here. Yep. So young Sith, we have not seen this. So a course of basic music theory and basic theory and music writing for musicians with visual impairments.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Rhoda. I can't, maybe it's just me, but I can't see it.
Oh, interesting. Let me stop the share and reshare and see what's happening. Thank you for the interruption. So do you see it now? Berklee final project.
For me, it just says Rhoda Bernard has started screen sharing,
And
but it
I,
doesn't
in fact,
say
have.
it.
Okay, so I just stopped it and Lisa can't see it either.
Yeah,
So
thank you,
let's
Lisa.
go to advanced screen sharing options. Yep, that's right. So let me try it again. That because I just was sharing, right? Everything was honky dory a minute ago. How's that?
Yeah.
Berklee final project. Woohoo! All right, we had a little glitch in the Zoom world. So Vicki, could you read this for me? I've been reading a ton. Can you read this one out loud for us?
Sure. Are you able to make it a little bit bigger?
I'm sure I can. I'll do it the easiest way I know how. Why won't it get, oh, it won't let me. Oh, yep, there we go.
All right. So it looks like this is for music writing and basic theory for students with visual impairment. And this information data from Ministry of Social Development and Human Security of Thailand. 2020, there are 1,301 musicians with visual impairment. Oh, that's interesting data.
Yes.
Also, there are less than 20 music students with visual impairment who have the opportunity to study Bachelor of Music in the last decade. That is a barrier of, I'm sorry, Rhoda, impart communication?
Of communication. Yeah. This is, translation from Thai to English is impossible. So,
yeah.
So we're going to have to read around to put it in English, but it seems like there's a communication barrier in terms of music theory concepts, and also in terms of translating it to being able to perform music. The communication seems to be the main problem, which has interfered with the success of musicians with visual impairment to learn, understand, read, and write notation in accordance with Western musical theory, and to communicate and exchange ideas in the same language. So he's creating a course to allow students to develop that competency and destroy that barrier and make music theory and composition content much more accessible. 2 periods a week, 12 periods of 2 hours each, 2 lessons in each week, a lesson of reading and a lesson of creating. And the competency will be presented in a live performance by sighted and non-sighted musicians in the format of a string quartet live recital, which will take place halfway through. The recital will be broadcast online via the internet. And so now we have the philosophy. I'm going to hand it over to you again.
Okay, we've got equality for accessible learning and a sustainable music career, and encouraging students to shape their own identity musically. The objective is to produce the competency of learning music theory and creative music in the international standard. And the competencies they have listed, students are able to read and understand Braille music notation and theory. Students are able to create their own composition or arrangement in international standard Western music theory independently. Students' work is able to perform in public by their sighted musician. There's some resources, Braille music handout and notation. There's some software with line music notation, good feel Braille music translation. There's an entrance minimum requirement. Have to study musical instrument for 6 months to 1 year. They have to read Braille, and they have their own and know how to use the computer with the screen reader.
And then we have, and this is a bit of a long document, so I'm not sure we're going to go through literally every lesson is outlined here, which is so awesome. There's another part of this presentation that is a PowerPoint, I believe. I need to find it.
I think that would be helpful for me because I'm having trouble kind of processing it with the doc.
So I want to write Young Sith's last name correctly on my list. Great. Okay. So we've learned about what the problem is and the course and the teaching resources and tools. And then we see, this is a little easier, I think, how the course syllabus works, the 2 periods a week, and then weeks 4 to 6, the 2 periods a week. Pretty amazing. And what they are expected to achieve. So this is very ambitious in terms of, I understand the issue, but this is an extremely ambitious program for adult musicians who are visually impaired, and to sort of bring it as a bridge to get into Western music theory and to be able to communicate in and through that symbol system. I think it's a really fantastic idea. My initial feedback is it's going to take very particular instructors to be able to make that bridge really well. And I hope that there are qualified instructors who can do that for the students and help them. And I also want to make sure in a course like this that there's enough individualization, that the different musicians may be working at different levels with Western notation. So can we differentiate within the sessions? Those would be my questions. Vicki, what about you?
That summed it up. Thank you.
Wow, what a fantastic presentation. Yeah. Really interesting project. Terrific. So I'm going to go back to where I was and back to the folder. And that's Kristen, and Rachel McCulley we saw last time. We have not seen this one, and I'm going to write the name down first. Okay. So this is a project in the making. Please join us and enjoy. The members of the Bell Choir would like to share their artistry, ideology, methods, and vision. The musical child lives within all of us, and we are all capable, creative human beings, you bet. So let's see if we can actually see and hear this. I hope so. Ah. Yes. Wow. Let me go back to the PowerPoint. So the purpose is to encourage the artists in their city to serve the needs for appreciation, respect, and recognition, to serve the needs of the community by cultivating knowledge, resources, and possibility, and for growth, support, and acknowledgement. I am a person with a multi-dimensional reality. My culture, surroundings, family, education, experiences, longings, personality, interests, neurodiversity, strengths, and weaknesses, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, social, societal. You bet. What a fantastic slide. The Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, we talked about this, as you know, an international human rights treaty of the UN intended to protect the rights and dignity of persons with disabilities. Parties to the convention are required to promote, protect, and ensure the full enjoyment of human rights by persons with disabilities and ensure that they enjoy full equality under the law. The convention has served as the major catalyst in the global movement from viewing persons with disabilities as objects of charity, medical treatment, and social protection towards viewing them as full and equal members of society with human rights. Parties shall take appropriate measures to enable persons with disabilities to have the opportunity to develop and utilize their creative, artistic, and intellectual potential, not only for their own benefit, but also for the enrichment of society. It's based on a social model of disability, which we discussed in here. And this model of disability is recognized as the consequence of the interaction of an individual with an environment that does not accommodate that individual's differences. This lack of accommodation impedes the individual's participation in society. justified differential treatment, community-centered, specific measures which are necessary to accelerate or achieve de facto equality of persons with disabilities shall not be considered discrimination under the terms of the present convention. The convention therefore recognizes that to ensure de facto equality with others, it may sometimes be necessary, and we underline, to adopt measures that are specific to persons with disabilities. The community center perspective has been aimed at breaking traditions and changing attitudes that had created barriers. These barriers had been limitations for students with disabilities in terms of their access to a music education. This program has been instrumental in providing its members with means to take part in communal music life, changing biases and promoting equity. The community is centered in the sense that the local community is not only a context for the work, but a context to be worked with. That's a beautiful statement. People develop personal strengths when the community provides opportunities for them to turn to their developmental assets. Strengths can be learned or taught. This has been done through their community-centered music caring, where each student is guided towards realizing his or her musical potential, facilitating self-actualization and optimal well-being. And we have some beautiful photos of this work in action. We cannot give people a voice, but we can contribute to the construction of conditions that allow for previously unheard voices to be heard. The metaphor links the interest in each individual with the community. It opens a space for a social agenda without neglecting the personal issues of the participants, and opens a space for visions of a better world. And we have some other videos that unfortunately we don't have time for, but we've got some themes, some scenes from a rehearsal, and it is to be continued. So Vicki, what is your reaction to this presentation and this program?
Well, I mean, ooh, there's an echo happening. It stopped. Okay, it was very loud. It's a common theme we talk about here, and I think UDL is a big piece of this as well, but kind of eliminating barriers so that everyone has access to be who they want to be. And if that's a musical person, then that's what we need to do. And it's about reshaping the environment and the structures so that people can access what they need to access and be who they need to be. And I loved all those quotes from the UN as well, because that, that's the international piece of it too.
And I think related to that, and I agree with you 100%, it's about changing attitudes. So you get people together and you put them out and show what they can do, and it changes attitudes more broadly, so that then, because that's a part of the social model of disability. The barriers are many. They might be architectural, they might be policy, they might be procedures, but they also might be attitudes. And we have a long way to go in changing attitudes to open up access. And I think this kind of work, I mean, you cannot watch that video and not feel so overjoyed with what you see, and just these people expressing themselves in this beautiful, musical, joyful, creative, expressive way, right? So it's very, very powerful, I think, in terms of attitudes. So thank you very much for that project. And Lisa has a comment. Vicki, can you read her comment while I'm taking a look here for who we haven't seen yet?
And she says it has elements of a community music therapy approach.
Absolutely. So we have Kat Lau, who we have not heard from either. Unavailable to present, Kat, but we are here for you. We are with you and we are here for you. So, Vicki, can I ask you to read this time? I'm reading way too much.
Yeah, definitely.
So Playing with Songmaker by Kat Lau, and I'm handing it over to you.
All right. So the background, students in our learning center are creating stop motion videos. I love stop motion videos. Armin, who's 15, has autism, ADHD, and severe dysgraphia. That's a math disability. He struggles to contribute to the project, but he shows an interest in music. I wanted to explore the Chrome Experiments Songmaker as a tool for Armin to create simple music for student videos.
Oops, here we go.
So here's the Chrome Music Songmaker.
Which is part of the Chrome Experiments and Chrome Music Lab that Tomas actually shared with us.
Oh, nice. And then there's some images, having Armin to have fun with the task to start, played him a scale and drew his attention to the colors. We love the colors. Each shape, the circle and triangle added a beat. He could also experiment with instruments and tempo using the red arrows. Fun, fun. 10 minutes later, oh wow, asked him to try playing a melody. He dragged the mouse back and forth, covering the screen with color. This sounds similar to dragging mallets back and forth across a marimba or hitting random bars. You have to experiment to see what things sound like. So they made the suggestion to make patterns. So it's more of a visual. This almost looks like a word.
Yeah, it does.
I'm curious. Armin didn't drag the mouse everywhere on the screen to start, but lost concentration quickly and added more color. She created a pattern for him to repeat and asked him if he could recognize the melody. He was able to repeat the pattern well and recognized it. It's Old MacDonald Had a Farm. So there's a little more direct instruction there. I asked him to create 3 of his own patterns. So now that he had the Old MacDonald pattern, he was to make a new one. Now that he knows what a pattern is. With the blank slate, he drew a wave, a pattern, and is able to create a more easily heard rhythm pattern. So I'm just looking at this. I feel like this is a drawing almost, like he's more visual. He was able to create another rhythm pattern, but tells me he enjoys the sound of dragging his mouse. Armin says these are the patterns he knows. He gets frustrated and drags his mouse across the screen again. And then they talk about patterns again. She offers him help to begin a pattern in the rhythm. He asks if he can use the melody he recognized from the last lesson. Oh, that's great that he's asking that. And then he added his own patterned rhythm. Here's the reflection, which I love. Armin doesn't get seen regularly. Of the 2 sessions we had doing this, there was a lot of recap. So a lot of review. He likes seeing the colors, but cannot describe the music as a finished piece. He has the words, so I don't believe this is the problem. Takeaway. It is a fun and simple music making tool. It doesn't function as a song maker the way I had hoped, but it is a fantastic instrument for someone otherwise unable to play.
And that is the last slide.
Yeah, I'm curious about that second bullet. She asked him to describe the music. She knows he has the words, but I guess I don't know the students. I would say not to make an assumption that because someone has the vocabulary that they can put the words together to, I mean, it's an open-ended question to describe how they're perceiving the sound of music, I guess. So that might be another task where the teacher needs to provide an example of what, here's a song, we're going to listen to it. This is how I would describe. These are the words I would use to describe the song. Now let's look at yours, your pattern. Let's listen to it. Now can you describe it? I think using exemplars or examples or models of completed work, like the Old MacDonald pattern was like a model of what she was expecting. Right. That can help a student kind of think to the future and know what they're supposed to do with the task. But sometimes when something's so open-ended, you might get that result where the student is just like coloring across the whole song maker. But at the same time, like I kind of like just having it be so open-ended and flexible in the beginning for him to kind of experiment.
What I was thinking start it off at the beginning and just go crazy, do what you want to do. And then, all right, we're going to focus on this. I'm going to show you, try. Yeah. It's clear that there is pleasure and I like running my mallets across the keys. I'm like all over that. So I get it. Different people like that experience or like that sound, whatever. So let him have that. And then something more structured if you're really going after patterns, I think could be really fun. And maybe that's not the right tool. Maybe that's a good tool for certain things, and maybe there's a different tool for patterns. So Osmo Coding Jam that Tomas showed us is a really good tool for patterns for some students. That might be another thing to look at, or another aspect of the Chrome Music Lab suite. Fantastic, Kat. Thank you for that project. Back to the share. I want to just make sure we're getting to all of the ones that have come in that we haven't heard from yet. Kim, we saw. I'm pretty sure. Am I making it up? No, we have not seen Kim. So I'm going to put Kim down on my list and we will watch Kim's video.
Hi, I'm Kim, and I am a K through 5 general music teacher and a 5 through 8 band teacher in a public school. We have been in school for most of the second semester. First part we did do remote, but I am in all the kids' classrooms right now. So I go from room to room. We have no instruments and cannot sing. So a lot of this stuff I'll put in place more for next year, but it's been some great ideas for me. Starting with this, when the kids come in my room, I have always had a schedule, but I've never had it posted anywhere. And I think this is an awesome idea so that the kids understand what to expect. I particularly like the suggestion where you put who's going to be expected to play in the middle part so the kids can mentally prepare. So, another thing I changed was I play instrument bingo with the kids, and that's been real easy to do at their desks, thank goodness. And but I used to just copy it off, and they'd have the names, and I'd pull them out. So this year I changed it. I added color to it. I added pictures of the instruments, and I added sounds so that kids can hear whatever instrument and match it to the sounds when we're on their devices. Or I can just have like the younger students listen when I play it and then mark it off on their own. I also have a visually impaired student this year, so we were able to add Braille to all of this for him too. Next is my rhythms. I definitely cleaned this up for an example of what I used to be. That's what I used to give the kids. So this is quite a bit different and for the positive. I think it's clear for the kids, and I have actually tried this out with a couple of classes and had a lot more success just because I think, like you said, the color adds so much, separating it out and the pictures. Then this is the biggest thing I've been working on, and this is mostly for next year. But this is a collection of songs that the kids can play on their device, or even when we get back to regular classes that I can put on my Promethean board and they can use in class as like a big discussion. I did put a lot of information at the beginning here, but this is not just for me. Some of my students have individual aids, so my hope is that the aides could refer back to this if they need help without necessarily waiting for me to get to them. And some of the older kids can read it too. I tried adding a lot of color again. I put videos in so kids could actually hear, and see what's going on with these. And then these are a constant reference for them. I tried to show some of the patterns that they use. I put the same in with rhythm so they can see the rhythm, see what it's like on the staff, and then also listen to it. And that's always a struggle. So I like to have that reference for them. And I did the same with rest too. So this has taken the longest time for me. This actually leads them into the actual playing, and I put some different keyboards on here. But when they go into it, there's several different songs that they can choose from for different ability levels. I'm thinking a lot of my kids will be able to play 5 songs right away. Some might be able to play 3. Some might be able to just play 1, which is fine either way. But they click on the song, and then they have the notes on the staff that they'll need, the colors, the different keyboards. It is a little cluttered to me, so I'm going to see how that works. But I tried to keep it consistent on the same pages, so hopefully that will help them as they use it. There's an audio version on each slide for the song. This will bring them back to the help pages. And then as they progress, they can just click the different keyboards to try like without the keys. Hopefully, eventually they'll make it to the black and white version. And then I also was able to modify this for my visually impaired students with the hope that, again, this will be on my Promethean board and they can use their hands. I can center them on red and yellow and they'll still be able to play hot cross buns. The audio again, and he's very good at hearing things. So I see this as something in his range, I hope. And then I have a few up here for students that are still working with things like same versus different. So when they click on these, they go into a boom deck. I love boom decks, but these they just play. And these are already pre-made. And then they have to think between same and different. And if they get the wrong answer, well, it wouldn't let them go on. Sorry. It won't let them go on if they get the wrong answer. So thank you again for all of this information. I plan to put the summer to good use in making these even more accessible to my students. And again, to see where I was before, that is the song that I used to give the kids to learn how to play. So this is remarkably different. Thank you again.
Thank you, Kim. Vicki, would you like to respond?
I feel like that was great, first of all. It is dense with tech, which I love. And I love it because of the way teaching is right now with the pandemic, but also because kids love tech. So there were some things, was it all Google Slides and there were just audio? I couldn't tell, like, were there audio buttons that you just
Yes,
click?
there were audio buttons that you clicked. Yeah.
So cool. So super differentiated, of course. And she's clearly a very flexible teacher. She says they pick the song that they're comfortable with. It doesn't matter to me what they pick. And I love that there was that one slide where you could choose a color-coded keyboard that matched the color-coded stuff. And if you felt ready to move on to the white and black keyboard, you could do that. And that was all on the same screen. So you could switch back and forth between the two. And then the final thing that is very tiny, but it is actually very big, is when you have an agenda posted, and if you are a teacher who struggles with time management, like me, I tend to go slow because my students are very, take a while to process information. Having the times next to each of the pieces on the agenda is very helpful. So she had 5 minutes for the first thing, 20 minutes for the next thing. Sometimes I actually put the clock times, like 9 o'clock to 9:05, 9:05 to 9:25, so that the students can see, like, this is how long we're going on this task, or this is when the task will start and end. And that can help with students with autism too, who are focused on time.
Absolutely. I love this project. So much wonderful self-directed stuff, so many choices, fantastic use of technology, and so many strategies that support the color coding, the different prompts that are faded. It's really, really well done. Kim makes one statement towards the end, and I will agree with her. There are some slides that look a little cluttered. So for some students, you might need to break it up into 2 slides to get all that information out. Because for some students, as we've talked about before, too much in one place or on one screen or on one page can be overwhelming and can be hard. To be prepared for that and to have sort of the plan B of, oh, not all at once, here's 2 separate ones that together have everything, could help that piece of it. But I think that's really only with certain individuals. I think overall, the use of the tools and how well they work with the technology and how they're set up this way and then they can be on the Promethean board when she's back, I think is fantastic. Really terrific project. So thank you, Kim, for that. These are so fun. So many great ideas here. Oh, screen sharing paused. There we go. We're still sharing. So let me get back to the folder. Have we seen this one?
That does not look familiar.
Rebecca Adams, we have not seen Rebecca Adams. Learning to read music. So present. We can just talk through this one. Rebecca works as a special education case manager and teaches private string lessons to a studio of 30 students. Violinists, violists, and cellists, ages 5 to 75, and throughout there are people with learning disabilities. She has Orton Gillingham training for reading, which is a direct approach to learning basic reading skills. Step by step, start small, uses a lot of phonics targeting to pattern. I'm very familiar with that approach, actually. And she decided to apply that to her music teaching for 2 students, broke down the process in a way that mirrors that program, looking at a note card and giving a name and fingering, so you've got sounds, reading target sounds with rhythms to gain concentrated practice in reading the note, and putting several notes into context by playing a simple song of 3 to 4 notes, which maps onto words in Orton Gillingham, and playing a repertoire song containing target notes, which maps onto text. So there's 2 students here, a 27-year-old with dyslexia who struggles to read words and finds working with her hands much easier. She can produce sounds and play into the 3rd Suzuki book, but cannot read the notes on the page fluently when asked to. And then student number 2 is a 75-year-old man starting the cello who's been diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury and is in the early stages of dementia, referred by his doctor. He struggles to learn and retain skills at all in music. He'll seem to understand a concept, but when you check back a week later, he didn't, or it hasn't retained. So with student 1, she started by introducing one string with note cards showing the target note, only gave her 3 to start with, A, B, and C, and added as she showed mastery. Wonderful. Once those notes were practiced, they went into a song created specifically using those notes so you could discern between them in a context, and then went to her repertoire songs to keep practicing other skills, labeled the notes that were outside of her comfort zone using fingering 0 to 4, and color-coded the strings. There are a lot of strategies in here. Student 2, very much the same formula, but scaffolded a bit more. Targeted one note per week, stalling for a week to ensure he was retaining all of the notes, leaving the flashcards with him, and part of his practice was to go through them. He would go on to several different exercises consisting of the target note and rests, focusing not only on the note, but bowings, rhythms, tone, and posture. After 2 notes, there were exercises to practice discerning between the 2 notes and play through those for homework. So far, student 1 is reading better. While she certainly hasn't mastered the notes we have gotten through, she is much more certain of what she is doing and often asked to speak through her notes before in her songs, which is generally accurate, which is great. Student 2 knows 3 notes fairly well. Rebecca has to quiz him frequently on the notes, and we've started him reading songs like Hot Cross Buns and Mary Had a Little Lamb. One thing that Rebecca really likes about teaching one-on-one is you can learn about your student. Oh yes, not only their interests, but getting to know them personally and knowing how they think. Great teaching is all about investigating how our students think. Knowing how her students think and learn as individuals helps her to be a better teacher. She likes the challenge of figuring out what works and what doesn't, and targeting skills and concepts in a way that works for them. Vicki, response.
Well, my first thought is just how these 2 students are so unique. An older man who has traumatic brain injury and is beginning the early stages of dementia. And then the person in their 20s who has dyslexia. But I'm not as familiar with Orton Gillingham, but I know the Wilson learning system, and I know that there's overlaps with that in terms of teaching decoding and encoding words. So I love that you're trying to kind of use the same strategy with the music reading. And it sounds like you're doing some multimodal instruction as well, which is going to help with memory and any sort of struggles with dyslexia too. I think I just don't know a lot about the older population and like traumatic brain injury, but my guess is it's gonna take a long time. And you already see the 2 students, you know, the second student is not progressing as quickly as the younger student. So keep being consistent, try not to add too much, keep doing what you're doing, and don't make too many changes along the way. But I do like that you're giving homework so that they're trying to maintain skills that are learned that throughout the week, so that when they come back to you, hopefully they have retained some of what they learned.
I agree. I love the language learning, music reading learning connection. And I do think those strategies can be leveraged really well. But it's all about getting to know these individuals and how they learn. And it's going to take a lot of patience. It's going to take a lot of time. And it's going to progress more slowly than Orton Gillingham does with reading with most students. It's just going to be a slower go. The strategies are really good and really specific. And it sounds like Rebecca's pacing them really well. She's not trying to do too much. And I would just encourage to just stay patient and stay slow. But fantastic ideas, and what a great adaptation for these students. I think it's fantastic. Back to the folder. I think we're getting through. Let's see. Back to the folder. Rhythm for all students, I think we saw. Am I right about that? No, we have not. Christopher McGillicuddy. I remember reading this project this morning. I'm writing your name down so it's on my list. So this is Christopher and his project.
Hello all, I hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to talk about my approach to teaching rhythm for all students. My name is Christopher McGillicuddy. I'm a first year elementary school music teacher in Chelmsford, Massachusetts. I see all students at my school from kindergarten through their 4th grade. So I have found that a iconic way of teaching or iconic notation for rhythm has worked well for all of my students. So to represent a quarter note, we say pi, apple to represent 2/8 notes, and chicken finger to represent 4/16 notes. We do use the traditional quarter rest. Everyone understands that, including the kindergartners. We just say shh. So our process, we perform these patterns as a class, then we compose. They have a chance to compose on the smartboard, and then we individually compose and perform rhythms using flashcards that I created. So this is what they would see on a Google slide. I have a Google slide PowerPoint presentation with a bunch of slides, and each one has different patterns. So I would say ready, go, chicken finger, shh, apple pie, and they can all clap or tap or perform with an instrument that pattern. Next, we go on to composing rhythms. They're able to come up to the smartboard, drag and drop these pictures to create their own rhythm or compose their own rhythm, and then they perform it for the class. After we do it together, then we do it individually. I created rhythm flashcards, and one side of the flashcard has those pictures, and the other side has the matching traditional notation. So one side has the apple, the other side has 2/8 notes. That allows for the students that are a little more advanced, maybe they take lessons outside of school, they can flip it over and create rhythms that way because they know how to read that music. By 2nd grade, most of them have figured out that it lines up and they're flipping it over on their own. So all of my students have found success with this approach. There's a wide, very diverse group of learners at my school, but they're all able to do this. Maybe they don't engage as much when we're doing it as a class, but then when we do it individually, they're doing it. They love the tactile approach when using the rhythm cards. And again, kindergarten and 1st graders are using the iconic notation, and then 2nd graders, they start flipping over those rhythm cards on their own. So that is great. Again, my name is Christopher McGillicuddy. If you're interested in any of the resources that I've created, please email me, mcgillicuddyc@chelmsford.k12.ma.us. Thank you and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Christopher. So I really love this project. I'd like to jump in because there's one place that I think we can give Christopher some advice. So iconic notation is fabulous. We've seen it in other projects here. Students really really get excited about it. Having it all be foods is great. Lots of good systems. The transition between the icons and conventional notation is a challenge sometimes. And it's great that the students can recognize that 2/8 notes is apple and that the 2nd graders are turning it over. I want to make sure that Christopher then goes to a performative model for that we're using tas and titis or do's and do days so that we can say apple when we look at apple, but eventually we're going to be looking at only conventional notation. And like Vicki would say, the apple's not going to be there anymore. So we need to get to the tas and titis as well and start working that in, or do's and do days, so that the students are using other nomenclature for those rhythms so that when you move them to conventional notation, they can still perform it. I also think this is a great opportunity to help them with audiation. So some of the students might need more processing time. And so some of the students that Christopher says may not perform with the group might not be able to perform with the group because they need a little bit more processing time before they can perform it. So there are things that you can do for that. You can show them the strip of what they're about to say, and you can say, everybody take a moment and hear it in your head before we start. And you wait 10 seconds and you let them, and the 10 seconds feels like 10 hours when you're waiting, but you do it because we all are, worrying about our time. But you wait those 10 seconds to give folks the 10 seconds to process, and then you cue them in and go. And I bet you'll get many, many more of the students able to participate just by having that processing time. So the processing time helps those students. It also helps every student audiate because they're hearing it in their head. And one of the key skills that a musician needs to have is to be able to hear things in their head before they do it. So you're actually building that skill for all of your students. So those are two pieces that are suggestions for Christopher, but I love what he's doing with the students, and it's clear that it's working, which is terrific. Vicki, any comments from you?
I think he is modeling differentiated instruction to a T. There's so many different patterns of work that are happening: whole group, small group, individual. There's multimodal instruction. There's expressive and receptive understanding, and demonstrating understanding receptively and expressively, excuse me. So I do like all that. And I like what you're saying, to give students an extra 10 seconds just to process. And that I think just for everyone to hear, like, wait time is so valuable for those students that need an extra 5 to 10 seconds. Using wait time can really improve your practice quite a bit.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vicki. We are back to the folder. And we saw Krista this morning. We've seen a bunch of these. Oscar Jr., I do not think we have seen. So let's do singing activities. Here we go. Oscar Jr. T. Don, singing activities, and we are presenting. Here we go. So we've got some singing activities here, and I need to move this so I can read it. Activity number 1 is vocalization for sustained notes and flexibility. Activity number 2 is vocal play. Number 3 is ascending and descending tones, melodic intervals. Number 4 is moving rhythmically while singing. Number 5 is rote chanting. Number 6 is rote singing and moving rhythmically while singing. So now we're combining. And number 7 is chanting and proration. So now I have to move this over here so I can read. Oops, that was me trying to move the pictures of Vicki and me so I can see. Here we go. Activities to enhance performance and singing skills. Activities on vocalization to develop the proper use of voice, particularly necessary for the development of melodic and rhythmic experiences for the students. So here's the first activity. It'll help the students develop the proper posture and good tonality. Vocalization on sustained notes, on ah. The teacher gives the right pitch and the students sing it when the teacher cues on the vowel ah. Then we get more flexibility, ma, mau, mo, mu, mi, and a more arpeggiated and then short melodic fragments. Begin gradually quickening the tempo, separate the tones at first, and then combine them in various groupings using vowels and consonants. The teacher will give the right pitch and the children sings the words with the given pitch. These are vocalizations that a lot of us use in warming up singers. Vocal play. Activities preliminary to the creation of a melody in the classroom are those that the children use in vocal play. Musical conversation on 1 or 2 tones helps to free the singing voice. So sol mi, for example, we see a lot of that here, or la do la sol mi. A lot of pentatonic work here, where the teacher sings a question and the student may reply. So we're using vocal play on certain pitches. Ascending and descending tones and melodic intervals help students improve their difficulty in singing these tones and with an awareness of melodic intervals. So then the specific activities, you sing it by rote, you observe and then sing, and you start with ascending tones, then descending tones, and then static tones. moving rhythmically while singing. Using the song busy, the students move rhythmically while singing and doing what the song says and the steps written out. Step, tap, turn around, as suggested by the song. Then we have rote chanting. The teacher chants first and the students imitate it, patting the beats, patting your knees for the beats, combining it and doing the movements that are suggested in the words. Rote singing and moving rhythmically while singing. Now we're combining the two of them, right? And chanting and proration allows the students to improve their difficulty using French time names and proration. Serves as a guide for the students to be easy to chant and prorate every measure of the song, clapping while chanting, and singing by rote. So those are the activities that Oscar Junior T. Don is using and wanted to present. So I think it's really interesting how those are broken down and the steps from one activity to the next. And I love the activities, and they remind me of the times I've done warm-ups with choral groups and on my own, and in voice lessons. The question I have is what visuals are being used when these activities are happening? Because I think some students will need visual prompts, not just the auditory back and forth. So in conventional choral warm-ups, right, the teacher might sing and then the students, it's an auditory thing. They hear it, they sing it, they sing it, they sing it. But to have visual supports, I think would help a lot of students. And they don't have to be conventional notation either, but some visual supports I think could be very helpful. And I also think that some students might need intermediate steps between the activities, might need to be on one activity for a while, and then before getting to the second activity, they might need an intermediate step that's that same activity, but a little more challenging. And especially when we get to the place where we're combining two activities at a time, we may need much more time before we're ready to do that. So for some students with disabilities and diagnoses, it will take a while before those two things can be combined. So those were my reactions. I love the activities and I think they're great for singing and for vocalization warm-ups, but those are a couple of things for us to think about. What about you, Vicki?
I mean, this is your area of expertise, Rhoda, so I don't have a ton to say because it's not mine, but I wonder what suggestions or what ideas this person has for inclusion. And it wasn't super obvious to me in the presentation, and maybe it was to you because this is your area. Like what accommodations or what differentiated instruction are they using to make sure everyone is included?
And I think that's mostly about how it's broken up into steps, because
Okay,
that's different from how it's done conventionally. But I think there's opportunities for even more.
Okay, great.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, back to the folder. And don't you love how Zoom puts this toolbar right where you don't want it? Okay. Katerina, we have not heard from either. I'm writing down Katerina's name. A Time for Joy. Vicki, could you read for us this time?
I can.
I have been reading so much. Here we go.
Okay, so who are Katerina, right? Was that the name? Who are Katerina students? The class has 7 students and a few disabilities: autism, Down syndrome, multiple disabilities, and medically fragile. 3 are nonverbal and they use communication devices. 7 have a speech delay, and 4 out of 7, English is not their first language. So there's some support. There's a classroom teacher, 2 aides, a one-to-one aide, and a nurse, and they meet only for 20 minutes each Wednesday. Whew, that is not a long time. And a little bit about Katerina. She's a music teacher and she has a special ed license. Her first 4 years, she worked as a special ed teacher in a school for autism, as well as an intervention specialist to help with inclusion. In the last 5 years, she's been teaching K-4 music. Teaching this class was my dream group. So I volunteer my planning period to teach them separately. Oh my goodness. Okay. What she learned as a teacher: Although I've studied UDL, after taking this course, I noticed that I was lacking visuals, all right, that would enhance my instruction, make my students more comfortable or successful learning. With the help of their classroom teacher, she learned to sign some common words and implemented that. She used teaching props to serve as an extension of their creativity, and differentiation can be done in the middle of the lesson for everyone to be successful. What did I use in my lesson plans? So short songs for singing, and it looks like there's a fill in the blank. Listening examples where they were doing active listening and responding, body movements with or without props, playing instruments, and puppets. Biggest takeaway, the students have strengths that are not often discovered, cannot afford to provide them all with all learning opportunities that are available and not assume the outcome. For example, the virtual opera performance with paper puppets in black and white. The biggest reward, seeing the students' faces light up when they enter the music classroom.
Wonderful. Thank you, Katerina. Vicki, what's your reaction?
Well, I'm reminded of when I was in grad school. So I'm a special ed teacher and I have a license in moderate disabilities, grades 5 through 12. And I remember I had this one professor, and I'll never forget when he said this, but he said, it is our job as teachers to fan the sparks into flames. So it seems like she has a sense of what her students are capable of. She's giving up her prep just so she can teach them in this like kind of self-contained music classroom. She sees potential and she's doing whatever she can to ignite those abilities and make them feel successful. And I know that it feels good to see their faces light up when they enter the music classroom, but that is a testimony of the fact that you're doing your job well. So it's more than just, oh, that feels nice. I think when students walk into a classroom and they are genuinely happy about it, that is a huge sign that you're creating instruction that allows them to access the learning. And it's not this huge struggle, it's not too much of a challenge. So
absolutely true. I love that visuals became a focus because I can't argue for that strongly enough. And that let's take universal design, which she knows, and really make that a part of what she's doing. So I think this is a terrific undertaking, and more power to her for giving up that 20 minutes on Wednesdays. And hopefully it'll become a real class as part of the real schedule in the future. But I think that's amazing. Thank you, Katerina. And on we go. Okay. Jean, we had. Lisa, we had. Here's one I don't think we've seen. No, we have not. Hanako. Okay. Well, Hanako, even though you cannot attend, we are here for you. So I'll do this one, body percussion and notation. A socially distanced in-person elementary music class in an international school in Singapore. It's a 35-minute lesson with students in 2nd grade. The goal is to incorporate playful exploration in general music classes to be more inclusive, collaborative, and due to the nature of this year, to prepare materials that could translate to asynchronous and online learning. It's a composition-centered unit. Previously, they had used Beat Center and GarageBand to create layers of rhythmic patterns. Iconic representations of music was shown without explicit instruction, and there was an introductory video to take time as they settled into their classes. And then they had different prompts about what they saw and heard and about the layers. In the interest of time, we're going to proceed without the video. Steve Reich, we're going to proceed without Steve Reich, I'm sorry. The task was that students were then given a 4x4 grid and some examples using symbols, colors, and so forth to represent sounds or silence and movement were modeled. They decided as a class how they would read the boxes left to right or top to bottom. And although there are students who are literate in languages that read right to left, they decided to go left to right and top to bottom. And each student received a blank grid and markers, and they wrote and drew their piece and performed for a partner. And they had options to make a second draft or create a new piece together. So here's a little bit of what that notation looks like. And we'll read over here. Some students developed keys to help remember the symbols and only adjusted the shapes. Many of them used familiar body percussion, but some extended their body percussion sounds to rhythmic or animal sounds and soundless movements, such as a dab. Some students only adjusted, that tool, there we go, only adjusted colors but stayed with the same shape. Some students could better differentiate ta and titi. So there's a lot of different levels going on here, right? It's quite differentiated because the students are creating their pieces. Connections to this course are UDL and incorporating expressive and personalized visuals, awareness of the social emotional needs and students with disabilities through intentional groupings and individual interventions as needed. Small moves made a difference. Explicitly telling students your body percussion can include movements that show us how you feel today, and saying things like how might your music look like? Show us how it sounds. Encourage students to be expressive in the notation and in their movements. Higher participation than in a body percussion only lesson, and some students wanted to write more pieces. That sounds like a pretty effective lesson for sure. Vicki, what is your feedback?
It certainly is personalized. I'd kind of like to take a class like that where I'm inventing my own notation. That's so fun and exciting. It's like it's so differentiated. There's so many options, but it sounds structured along, each piece of the decision making is structured. So it's not like, it didn't seem like it was this completely open-ended task. There was still structure to the choice making in it. And I think, Rhoda, you've said this already, but just make sure that wherever you're going with this, that there is a link or a connection to the notation at some point, because that transition can be hard for some students.
I couldn't agree more. I love projects like this. I love invented notation projects, and body percussion is great. And especially in given the remote context, like we've heard in other presentations. I think in the first session today, we had a presentation about a music class with found materials from home, because that's what we've got. And body percussion was part of that too. So being able to do that remotely. My big question is, so now what? What do we do with this? What comes next? And how do we make that bridge to conventional notation, if that's a bridge we want to make? And what does that look like? And I think I think we've got a great foundation, and the question is which way we want to go with it. I think it's great. So thank you, Hanako. Back to sharing. You're really going to let me, there we go. And Katerina, this is a different Katerina, and we have not seen this Katerina. So let me write Katerina's name here, and we'll hear Don't Worry, Be Happy in just a moment.
Hi, my name is Katerina Sataris Mackey, and I live in the Boston area. In fact, I graduated from Boston Conservatory, and I just wanted to share with you what I did for my project with a special needs group at school where I teach. I teach 3rd through 6th grade, elementary, general music, and I also conduct the choir. I chose Don't Worry, Be Happy by Bobby McFerrin to teach the kids. And they sang the song, and they played drums and tambourines or wood blocks, whatever rhythmic percussion instrument they wanted to play. So what I did is I had a few rehearsals with just the special needs students and a few rehearsals with the regular education students. I had about 6 special needs and about maybe 8 regular education students. And I rehearsed with them separately in the beginning, and then the last one or two rehearsals we rehearsed together before the videoing the final day, the performance that I videoed for all of you. So it was a lot of fun. I think it was really great to spend time with just the special needs children, really work on their beat and their rhythm and their accuracy, and help them with their singing voices, and just get to know them and make them feel confident and sure of their musical ability. And then when the regular education kids came together with them, the performance was really wonderful for the short amount of rehearsals that we had. So next year, I'm going to continue with this design. I'm going to have some special needs children that want to be in my chorus and give them a few extra rehearsals so they can feel confident and play and sing with accuracy. And I think that's just going to make it a really great chorus. And then have my regular education kids all together with them. So I'm very excited about this. Thank you very much. And I hope you enjoy our performance of Don't Worry, Be Happy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1.
Whoops. All right. So fun. Vicki, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I'm glad that she had success using that new model. It kind of reminds me a little bit of just like a learning center model. So as a special ed teacher, I might have some students that struggle in the math class. So when they come to the learning center, when they're pulled out, for some other class, we might completely review the math lesson or preview a math lesson. And it's just the students on IEPs in that group. So we can really target what that group needs to work on, what their goals are. So it's almost like as a music teacher, she was able to kind of use that model for herself, which is great. And I think if teachers have that flexibility in their schedule, or maybe administrators can put that in the schedule, then those students can get the targeted instruction that they need and the attention they need to be successful within the gen ed.
Absolutely. Just watching how engaged the students were and how with it and on task, I was really impressed. I wanted to know even more, like I wanted to see the classes themselves. I wanted to know even more about the process and what she different approaches that she tried and what things she might continue and what things she might change. But I loved seeing what they put together. It's a great choice, really great choice for a song, and a great way to get the students involved, and they loved it. And they had this opportunity because of that close work with her to really succeed. So I agree, the model, it makes a big difference. Absolutely. Fantastic project. We are moving to, I think we're coming close to the end of our, Prima is a new one, but then I think we might be coming to, I think we have just a couple left that we haven't seen. So this is Prima. I should put Prima down. And I'm happy to read this one, Vicki. Teaching Music and Games the Fun Way by Prima Sundar. Games are food for the body and music is for the soul. We have fitness, body consciousness, stimulating the brain, calming the mind, and helping with processing information more quickly. Its applicability to groups, ages 5 to 18 and beyond, applicable to students with special needs and others, including people in wheelchairs, can be adapted according to the space or a garden or a park or a large ventilated classroom by moving the furniture. Some of the outcomes are turn-taking, social skills, leadership, numeracy, and respecting nature and the environment. We have some great photos here. So the idea is to incorporate more games into the different kind of activities that you do. I don't believe this is a
I
video.
feel like this is a video, maybe.
I'm pressing and I'm looking for video and I'm not getting it. So we can see the game here. It's one of those bridge dances. And organized folk dance is a big part of a lot of elementary music curriculum, but I agree that opening up these kinds of games and dances to a broader population can really sneakily teach a lot of things, both in terms of music and socially and and behaviorally, that can be really effective. So I love the idea of games and how we can differentiate within those games, I think is a really interesting question too. So thinking about students who might need different kinds of supports in order to participate in the games and what those would need to be so that we can reach them. What are your reactions?
Well, yeah, the differentiation within the games, I think about when the middle schoolers are playing games in the classroom and how much of a sensory experience it is, and how students with autism that struggle with sensory overload have a hard time with that. So I think if the games are loud and there's a lot of commotion and people are moving around, that there might need to be some previewing happening or some adjustments so that the student can still participate but not have a sensory overload experience. And also for students that struggle with change and they need predictability, that you'd also want to preview that there's going to be a new game happening, so that they're not struggling emotionally with the change.
Agreed. Great points. Thank you, Vicki. Okay. Back to the folder. We saw Emily, we saw Katerina. We have not seen this one. Xenia Pat-Zenker. And a sample life cycle of a subject in music instruction. And so we're going to learn about the why, the what, the how, and how do I know the information is made it to the class? So assessment. The target audience is for an elementary school class where neurotypical students and a student with special needs study together. And this is from Zinnia. The underlying principle of the approach is that music instruction should be accessible to all students. There are no two identical minds, no two identical musical cognitions, processes, and the entire class is neurodiverse. So involve as many modalities as possible in instruction and assessment. The subject is consonant and dissonant intervals. So that's the subject being taught. For the convenience of this presentation, suppose it's in a unit of 30 classes. The first 2 are dedicated to major second versus major third. The desired result is the students will be able to identify major thirds and major seconds in a quiz, an audiation quiz with interval sequences. Examples of multimodal activities that can be used. Listening to the teacher playing the harmonic intervals in the group discussion. What sounds tense and what sounds stable. How these intervals may be expressed through movement, an unstable pose versus a stable pose. Conventional instruction, demonstrating them on the staff and on the keyboard, referring to the number of tones and semitones and using manipulatives. So we go unconventional and conventional here. An association game. If you were to attach a certain image to the interval, what would it be? What animal, what plant, what shape? The teacher can suggest a bank and invite students to match them with images on the whiteboard. And you can also count which shape was used the most for each interval. Listening to the intervals and thinking what songs begin with them. That's something that's done very frequently, and listening to recordings of the songs. Performing the intervals on the xylophone harmonically and melodically. Then some students may be asked to play an interval and the class identifies it. You can play familiar rhythmic patterns using the intervals. You can highlight the consonants and dissonance by attaching a color from the warm palette to the root note and let the students decide, is the major third a matching color from the same warm palette or a mismatch, contrasting? What about the major second? So getting that tenseness and that consonance related in colors. Ear training with the immediate reaction. If you hear a dissonance, raise your hand or raise a card. Individual and small group research. Find all the major seconds or thirds on the C major scale and highlight them. How many are there? Compose a melody that will contain at least one major second and one major third, notated in a variety of different ways. Here are some ways to assess it. A quiz to identify intervals. Before the quiz, a conversation with the student with disabilities. How do you prefer to let me know what you know? I love that question. That is an awesome question. We don't ask that question enough. I will say it again. How do you prefer to let me know that you know? Oh yeah. And then lots of ways, pencil and paper, manipulatives, raising a card, making a corresponding movement. I love all that. So that is the project. To use Vicki's phrase from earlier today, that is multimodal to the max. And I love it. Intervals can be a very abstract concept. And the idea of consonance and dissonance is an abstract concept. And there's so many ways this was made concrete. And I cannot underscore enough, how would you prefer to let me know that you know, as a question to ask our students. Vicki, what are your reactions?
There were 10 access points that this person created. And I could see that from 1 to 10, you got more and more and more challenging. Mm-hmm. So it's almost leveled in a way too. And it seems completely accessible to the neurodiverse group that this person teaches. And I love it.
I love it too.
Very creative.
Yes, fantastic project. Thank you, Zinnia. Let's go back to the folder. And Tracy, we heard. Lisa, we heard. Moniz, Julia. I believe we have now seen our last project that we have received. So I'm going to stop the share. Big thank you to all of the folks present and folks from this morning and folks who couldn't be here for such a wide array of projects. One of the things I like about this study group is that with one set of sessions, we see such a wide range of applications. And that's what's going to make this meaningful to us, is what we can apply to our practice in a meaningful way. What's going to make a difference to us tomorrow, next week, next fall, whatever it is in our teaching. So I love seeing all of that, everything from research to performance, to strategies, to practices, to assessments. We had a whole bunch of all different kinds of things. So I want to thank you for the richness there. I have a few pieces of housekeeping, and then we'll finish a little early today. Nothing wrong with that. So on Monday, as it has been, you will get an email from me with the links to these recordings. You will also get in there a link to a survey for you to provide feedback. We've been giving these study groups for several years, and we use the results of the survey to change up what we do the next year. So we change the topic slightly. We change different aspects of the work that we do. So your feedback and input is really important. So we appreciate that. In terms of certificates of participation, we will be going through the data on who has participated fully, and we'll be sending those out in different shifts. We'll start with the folks who've been synchronous and whose participation has been right up to today, but we will keep checking back as people continue in the work, because we've got some asynchronous folks who are catching up, which is great. And so that you know, the Zoom cloud deletes the videos after 28 days, but I have downloaded them. So they are right now, and this one will be added to the list, they are right now being edited so that we can put them on our YouTube channel. So they will continue to be accessible to you and to the folks who need it for catch-up time on our YouTube channel. We will also put them in the Able Arts Resource Center, which is our online clearinghouse. So these are resources that are not going away. I encourage you to get in touch with each other through the contact information on people's projects, and to find ways to collaborate. I'm seeing people already in the chat coming up with ways to collaborate, which is great. We're going to keep you informed of the other professional development work that we do at the Berklee Institute for Arts Education and Special Needs. You are part of the family now, so feel free to continue to join us in our work. And we have our conference coming up next year, and a bunch of other things that we offer, workshops and consultations and other sorts of things. So Kevin, you would like to speak to me. Can I ask you to put in the chat, do you want to speak to me with everybody here or one-to-one? Privately. Okay. I can't really do that in the webinar setting, because what's going to happen, in order for me to let the other folks out, you're going to be let out too. So Kevin, I think if you want to speak to me privately, we're going to have to make a separate time on a separate platform to do that, or we can speak over email. But I can't speak with you privately in this webinar piece without everybody else hearing. So I apologize that we've got a limitation on this platform, but Kevin, get in touch with me and let's find another time to communicate, because I would love to talk with you when the technology will allow us to do so. Thank you all. Huge thanks to Victoria LaRiccia for spending the whole day with us today, and for all your participation and feedback. Could not do this without you. And thanks to everybody for creating this community where you are coming together and getting to know your peeps. In the previous session, one of the attendees was talking about finding her tribe in this group. And this is what it's all about. It's all about learning from each other, coming together, making connections, and seeing that we're not alone, right? There's a whole lot that we can give to each other and can share with each other and can support each other. So thank you all for making that happen. It's such a great pleasure to work with everybody, and congratulations on a terrific group of projects. And we look forward to being in touch. Watch your email on Monday. That'll be the first of what will come out from me. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day and a terrific summer. Thank you, everyone.